Hey there, friends. Welcome to the Taking Your Next Step podcast from Collegians for Christ. Through each episode, we will journey together focusing on knowing what you believe and why you believe it. If you are eager, like I am, to strengthen your faith and take your next step now by joining us in today's episode. In our upcoming weeks, we want to shift gears and look at a different theme, and it's the theme of this, on the daily for Jesus. Now, I've been intrigued, and really the emphasis, if you will, of this podcast is taking your next step. It comes from that little phrase that Jesus says, follow me. There is so much wrapped up in those two words, and I'm always trying to figure out how to be a better follower of Jesus, trying to figure out exactly what he means by that. And as we go through the upcoming weeks, we're really going to unpack that and really challenge ourselves to be on the daily for Jesus, not just Sunday mornings or not just at the outreach event, not when we feel like it, but every single day of our life. I had a student recently say this. He said, what if I held nothing back? What would it be like if I and those around me held nothing back, that we gave everything fully to Jesus? He says, so often I feel like I'm holding something back. I'm not quite able to fully let go. And I think about that in my own life. What about you and maybe your church, your Bible study group, your Sunday school class? What if every single person was fully devoted to Jesus every single day of their life? Wow, what an impact would be made. We kind of get this emphasis, if you will, on the daily. We see Jesus, he ministered daily. We come to Acts 17. We're going to see Paul as our example here for a few weeks. And we see that he is in the town of Athens. And one thing that sticks out to me in this area of ministry is this little word that says on the daily, or he ministered daily. And so we're going to examine this briefly here. It said this, now while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. As a result, it says, therefore disputed he in the synagogue with the Jews and with the devout persons and in the market daily with them that met with him. And I emphasize that word daily there. We're going to examine that and challenge ourselves with that word. But first of all, I want you to understand, Paul did not want to be in Athens. Now, Athens was the learning capital of the world at that time. It is home to the world's maybe first university. There's some argument there, but we do understand philosophy came out of Athens. It's home to Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates. And the academy was founded, Plato's academy was founded, and many will say the world's first university came from there. But what we do know is this was a place where people came all together. It was a center of literacy, arts, science, mathematics, knowledge, philosophy, all of that. What was it? It was just like the city that maybe you live in or live near. It would be just like where the major universities at in your state, where people are coming from all over to study and to learn and to grow in commerce and economics, and all of that's coming together for business and so forth. Now, what did Paul do? I said he didn't choose to go there. He was forced to go to this town because of other people's choices. We see that in the back verses leading up to this. He was run out of Thessalonica and he went to Berea. And when he got there, the Jews of Thessalonica found out that Paul was preaching there, and they went and stirred up more trouble. And so Paul was sent to Athens to wait. Now, have you ever found yourself somewhere you did not choose? Maybe even for doing right. Maybe it's a different job. Maybe you had to move. Maybe it put you in a different location. You had to change classes, degrees, whatever it is. How would you respond? Many times we respond with frustration, anger, discouragement. But here, Paul did not respond that way. He responded by being faithful right where God placed him. He remained faithful despite the circumstances. He didn't gripe. He didn't complain. He seized the moment that God had for him. And so we see, first of all, within Paul's method here, that he sat. He was willing to stay and to be used where God put him. But then we see Paul also, secondly, saw. Verse 16 says, he waited for them in Athens. His spirit was stirred in him. And watch this, he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. So what did Paul do? He spent time there, But he did this. He was looking and listening. He had eyes to see what was going on. He was looking at what was going on in the lives and hearts of those around him. It's so easy for you and I to become numb and apathetic and just go through life and not even see what's going on in the lives of those around us. We can go through life and just not even worry about it, not be concerned with it. Why? Because so many times we're inundated with it. We're bombarded with all this going on in culture. But this was not Paul. He spent time there looking and listening. As he did, he saw something. He saw a land of idolatry. He witnessed a city, think of this, completely given over to idolatry. They were putting any and everything in the place of God. Now, we may not have a statue downtown that people are worshiping, but it's no different today as you and I and people put so many things before God. That is essentially what an idol is something that's put in the place of God. Whether it's education, whether it's career, whether it's drugs, whether it's the pursuit of whatever it may be, sports, and you name it. There's so many things. Just even our own time and our own wants. We can put so many things, relationships, in the place of God. Essentially, in this city, God had no place. And Paul could see that, but also he could see the consequences of this. And so he sees a land of idolatry, but he also sees a land of unbelief. It says he was encountered by certain philosophers of the Epicureans and of the Stoics. And so here the Epicureans would be like the atheists of our day. They would deny God's existence. The soul is annihilated. The Stoics were very moral, ethical people. You would maybe say they're agnostic. There may be a God, there may not be. So there's nothing new under the sun. What Paul experienced in Athens, the same thing that you and I see today. What do we see today? You and I see this. We see hopelessness, and that is the word that is, when I talk to people on campus, some of the faculty and staff, that is the one word that is used over and over again to describe especially this younger generation. We see the hopelessness that resides in them, and I believe it's beyond just their age group. We see the suicide rate with the younger generation, second leading cause of death. We see the drug overdose epidemic. We see the mental health crisis. We see that truth is relative. We see there are no more absolutes. What is all this? It's no different than what Paul saw. But the difference is Paul was moved to action. We're going to see that he was stirred. What else do we see? We hear statistics like this: 60 to 80% of 18 to 22-year-olds who faithfully attend church will leave it. During that age stage, we hear this, that 52% of born-again believers will forsake their faith after attending 4 years at a state college, and 63% will forsake their faith after 4 years at a Christian college. That is backwards. Open up your eyes and let our eyes affect our heart. See what is going on around you. And look, stop just seeing the sin and see the sinner. Stop just seeing the effects and being disgusted because of the effects with the person and the people. You and I have to look beyond that. And that's what Paul was doing. He sat there, he saw, and it brought him to a point the Bible says he was stirred. When was the last time you or I were stirred? You see, too often we don't want to see. You see, if we can remain ignorant to the need, ignorant to what's going on around us, then we don't have to do anything about it. So we prefer to stay there. Because once we know, we are therefore accountable. And it's so much easier to remain ignorant and oblivious and not know what's going on. Here, Paul was forced to this town. There he could have griped, complained, done everything under the sun besides look around, listen. But as he did, he was stirred. In verse 16, his spirit was stirred in him, deep inside him. It means it was irritated. It grieved him. It provoked him to righteous anger. You see, biblical stirring should move you and I into action. You see, we can complain about what's going on in our culture with the younger generation, our country, or you and I can step up and do something about it. When was the last time you were stirred, that you wept over people, when you were moved by what you saw, when you drove by or you heard this, or you saw that on the news, or somebody shared this is going on in their heart, in their life? We become so numb and apathetic. How can we remove that? We've got to get our eyes off of ourselves. We've got to get our eyes back on Jesus. We've got to pray and ask God to remove it, for God to break our heart, for God to do something inside of us so that we'll see the needs of those around us, to start serving in ministry, to begin rubbing shoulders with unbelievers, with the world, so we can see and feel their need. So Paul was stirred after he sat there and saw, and he had to speak. Verse 17 says that. Then disputed he in the synagogue with three people here, three groups of people: Jews that have some knowledge of God, devout persons, that could be those in false religions, just very religious people. It could even be believers. And then in the market daily with them that met with him. Dispute here does not mean to argue. The biblical use of the word is where we get our word dialogue. It means to speak separate, to speak back and forth, or alternatively. What does that mean? To converse, to conversate, just like we would dialogue. So this is not when you hear dispute, sometimes you think about people arguing, maybe a domestic dispute. Please don't use our current context with the biblical usage of the word. Just think dialogue, think conversation. And guess what this requires? It requires you to listen. It requires you to ask questions of the other person, to answer questions. So what was Paul doing here as he was engaging these people? Well, he's engaging people with some knowledge of God. He's engaging very religious people, anybody who would meet with him, skeptics, agnostics, those who are ignorant of the truth, atheists, those who have been brought up in a Christian family but don't know Jesus as their Savior. This is who he's talking about. And you may be saying, hey, I'm not Paul. I couldn't do what he does. Well, that's a lie, because all Paul did was talk. And I can guarantee, whether you're introvert or extrovert, everybody can talk. Everybody can communicate. And if you're unable to maybe communicate with your mouth, you have other ways that you can sign and communicate. People will talk about what they love. Think about that during basketball or football season, hunting season. You'll find out people can talk about what they love. And so you and I should easily be able to talk about Jesus. But notice how often Paul did it. He did it daily in the marketplace. And this is what opened up the tremendous door of opportunity for Paul. Here he is in the marketplace, what people are doing, business. So here's what Paul is doing. Paul had to eat breakfast. So he's talking to the person there that he's getting his breakfast from. Paul has to go about and do business. He sees people in the street. He's waiting for a bus. He's going to his car. He's working with people. Paul was a tent maker. We understand Paul had to drink coffee, whatever it is. Paul was doing these things. He was holding Bible studies. He was answering questions. He was engaging people in conversation. He was listening to them, which is vital. And this speaks tremendously of vocational ministry. Everyone is called into full-time ministry. It's not just the pastor, the missionary, the evangelist. We're all called into full-time ministry. It's just different ways that we support ourselves. Your job is what will allow you to live so that you can minister full-time. There's no such thing as part-time ministry. And vocational ministry is something we put forward strongly with college students, because they may be a doctor, they may be a physical therapist, they may be a banker, they may be a contractor. That there then is their mission field. If you're a school teacher, that is your mission field, the people that you work with and the students that God brings in. And I know there's limitations to maybe what you can say and share, but there is light there, and there are opportunities for you to talk, speak, share the love of Christ. And when you look beyond, well, I'm not Paul, I'm not the pastor, I don't have these opportunities. No, where are you at daily? Paul found himself in the marketplace, in the public square, where vocation took place, and he was engaged in it daily. As a doctor with patients, they are your mission field. Your patients as a physical therapist, they are your mission field. Your customers within your business, they are your mission field. Look at it that way. Change your perspective. Change how you look at it. And remember, where God has placed you, that is your mission field. If God places you in Athens, whatever your vocation is, what are you going to do? You're going to be there on the daily. You're going to look, you're going to see, it's going to stir you, you're going to speak. And then lastly, here he stood. Paul was so ready for this opportunity. And we'll get into this more on another episode, but basically, because of what he was doing, the people heard him and wanted to hear more. And so they set up this whole situation there at Mars Hill. They invite the people in and they say, Paul, tell us more about Jesus. You say, what would this look like? This could look like in your workplace. Hey, a couple people want to get together because they hear you know something about Jesus and they're intrigued and they'd like for you to tell them more. Hey, they've got some questions they'd like for someone to answer. And maybe it's at the break. Maybe it's at lunch. Maybe it's after work. Maybe it's at an event. Maybe you're inviting them to your house. Whatever. They're inviting you to their house. Whatever it is. If we're faithful on the daily, God will begin to open up opportunities for us just like he did for Paul there. And Paul took full advantage of the opportunity. So think about this. What doors of opportunity could God open up for you? And look at ministry this way. It is on the daily. It's not Sunday morning only or Wednesday night or whenever a midweek service is or hey, whenever we go to do this community outreach project. That is not, it's not divided up into sacred and secular. It's not your vocation and then church. It's all together. Ministry happens in and at the church. Ministry happens in and at your home. Ministry happens in and at your place that you love to eat. Ministry happens where you work. And so look at it and think about what you can do for Jesus on the daily. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please share it with a friend or subscribe to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can connect with Collegians for Christ online for more information and resources at cfccampusministry.com.